Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of TLC. My name is Kelly Olson-Stewart. I am the program chair of the PhD in Education and associate professor at the University of Arizona Global Campus. I am the host of this session, U.S. Adult Basic Education, Correlations of Measurable Skill Gains, Jurisdiction Characteristics, and Participant Demographics, with our host today of Dr. Lisa Lamb, who was also my student. So I'm super proud and happy to be her host. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation. We do encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat for Lisa that we will address at the end. Also, we've enabled live transcription. If you would like to use that, just click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. I am pleased to first introduce Dr. Lisa Lamb. Lisa recently graduated from UAGC with her PhD in Education. With her husband's help, she chose to leave the workforce to become a stay-at-home mother to her 2 sons. And after having a child with special needs, Lisa was motivated to continue pursuing her education online to become a more effective homeschool learning coach for her children and other youth in her community. She has recently transitioned from working as an adult education instructor to becoming a private tutor and academic resilience practitioner. The purpose of Lisa's presentation today is to share the findings from the research she conducted at UAGC for her dissertation. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Dr. Lisa Lamb.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm really excited to be here and share this wonderful experience that I had doing my dissertation. And I am just looking forward to sharing everything that I learned from the experience, and I hope that everybody can glean something useful from this. So that being said, can you all see my screen?
Yep,
Okay.
you're good. That looks great.
All right. Okay. So moving forward, did you know that outside of the field of adult education, most people do not know that low literacy and numeracy is a hidden problem in the United States? At the time I collected my data, I found some statistics that were concerning to me. So at the time I collected, you can see some of the dates here were beginning back in 2019, and these were the statistics then. But as you can see, at least 32 million adults cannot read. 50% of adults cannot read an 8th grade level book. 19% of adults cannot fill out a job application or even read a newspaper. 21% do not have a high school diploma. 130 million adults are considered to have low literacy skills, and at least 54% read below the 6th grade level. So here we have a problem right here in the United States. The general problem that I explored with my research are that individuals who do not complete high school or earn an equivalent may struggle to acquire employment with sustainable wages, resulting in diminished social, health, and financial stability. The specific problem I explored is that there are low participation rates and low literacy and numeracy gains for students who are in federally funded adult education programs, which results in students not gaining the academic skills they need to improve their literacy and workforce skills. The purpose of my study was it was a quantitative correlational study that was intended to measure the extent to which U.S. jurisdictions, which is the states and outlying territories of the United States, and the adult basic education program characteristics of participant demographics and how they may be predictors of measurable skill gains or student success. This is important because literacy may be the key to solving many problems with unemployment, poverty, crime rates, and even healthcare. Adult basic education, or ABE participants, are vulnerable individuals who face many barriers to their employment, and this could help them find ways to increase their literacy and numeracy skills to help them obtain employment that would give them sustainable wages to support themselves and their families. And this research was important because it also helped to address a gap in the literature to explain why some states have higher measurable skill gain percentages, and if certain groups of adult basic education students are more successful than others. So what are measurable skill gains, or MSGs, and why are they important in research for adult education? MSGs are the federal government's measurement of student success from standardized tests, which impacts the future funding for states. And in adult education, MSGs are used to measure the student progress and program completion rates. Some of this may be familiar to you if you've worked in K through 12. This is the equivalent of a student advancing grade levels as they would in K through 12. So more knowledge of factors that increase measurable skill gains or student success rates is necessary to increase the literacy, numeracy, and employability skills for this population. In 2014, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and in adult education, we use a lot of acronyms. And for this particular legislation, you will often hear me refer to it as WIOA. But this became the legislation policy that was intended to improve the U.S. workforce system to help individuals, including youth and those who have significant employment barriers, increase their literacy and numeracy skills, and to help them obtain higher paying jobs with sustainable wages. The thing about WIOA is that its literacy and numeracy gains increase the likelihood of more funding opportunities for these states, but it is a performance-based model, which means that states are informally competing for literacy funding. So what this translates is participants who perform better are going to help secure future funding for their program in their respective state. The first main research question that I addressed in my study is, are U.S. jurisdiction characteristics predictors of measurable skill gains? And what this question is really asking is that there are specific characteristics with each state that is an indication that some of the population in different areas of the United States, they are experiencing more success than others. For example, there were 4 sub-primary variables that I looked at here under this question. For example, total credential rate, education attainment, population density, and the state governor's political party affiliation. The second research question that I looked into was, are ABE, or Adult Basic Education, participant demographics predictors of measurable skill gains? And again, what this question is really asking is, are there different characteristics with adult basic education participants that make them more successful? For example, employment barriers, sex, race, ethnicity, and age. There were a lot of sections in the literature, and for the purpose of my study, I researched. These were the main research questions that I looked into, but for the sake of time, I will not go through all of them. But you can see here, there was a lot that went into this, including the legislation. It was a big component of the literature. The main theme I wanted to really highlight today was, in the literature, something that surprised me when I first began research on this was the common challenges that adult learners with low literacy are facing. And here I just highlighted some of the main sections I explored, such as socioeconomic, health, digital, financial, feelings of shame, learning disabilities, and incarceration and recidivism. So you can see here there are many increased adverse consequences for this population of people, such as not completing high school, poor health, unemployment, poverty, incarceration, even fear of social stigmas. A lot of these people, they have a lot of feelings of shame and embarrassment. And for an already vulnerable population, these issues really seem to increase the marginalization. And there was also something that came out of the research that I found was that there tended to be more complications for those who have low literacy and learning disabilities. So this was a concern to me, and this was a primary theme that came out of that literature. So I used a quantitative correlational design for my methodology to help me establish if there was a statistical or measurable relationship between the dependent and the independent variables. The most recent published reports that were submitted by the states to the U.S. Census Bureau, the United States Department of Education, and Department of Labor were used as secondary or archived sources at the time of data collection. And although the reports by the states are submitted every year, the system is slow, and so it takes a long time to get all of those numbers in. So I used the most recently published reports that were available at the time. The sample was originally intended to only include just the basic 50 states in the United States, but data for at least 9 US territories were included in the reports, and so I elected to include them as well. The data was collected from several secondary sources. The dependent variable was the measurable skill gain percentage, which was collected from the WIOA statewide performance reports that the states submit to the US Department of Education. The first independent variable was US jurisdiction characteristics. I collected many of these statistics from things such as resident population, population density from the Census Bureau. I used the Digest of Education statistics reports, the ABE program participant statistics for each state I collected from the Department of Education, and also the state governor's political party affiliation from the National Governors Association. The second independent variable was the ABE program participant demographics, including their subvariables from the WIOA adult performance reports that were submitted to the US Department of Labor. The data was analyzed using a correlational, multiple linear, and multi-level regression analysis. I used this design to help me, the design was set up to help me assess for correlations between the measurable skill gain percentages, so my dependent variable, and the US jurisdiction characteristics and ABE program participant demographics, my independent variables. This method helped me describe and analyze the strength of the prediction of the measurable skill gain percentages. It also helped me determine the predictive nature of the independent variables. And the SPSS software was used to help me with the statistical calculations and data analysis. The primary hypotheses for this study were that US jurisdiction characteristics and ABE program participant demographics are predictors of measurable skill gain percentages. And I'm proud to say and was surprised to see that the data that I did collect for this research study was rich enough that I feel like I really am satisfied that I got enough information to conclusively say that yes, the null hypothesis for the total credential rate and employment varies were rejected, indicating that the results did declare that there are US jurisdiction characteristics are predictors of measurable skill gain percentages. And the state governor's political party did have a marginal predictive ability as well. There were a couple other variables that had marginal predictability as well. And the ABE participant demographics were also found to be predictors of measurable skill gain percentages. So the null hypotheses for the credential rate, employment earnings, and age were rejected. And here I created a friendly chart here to just try to give you an overview because there was a lot of variables that I had in this study. And so for the sake of ease, you can see here that yes, there were the primary variables, but there were also additional elements under these main variables that you can look into and see which ones specifically were found to be analyzed in conjunction with this hierarchy model that I had created. So here you can see here for research question 1 for the US jurisdiction characteristics. For the sake of ease here, you can see credential rates, participants in adult basic education, adult secondary education, the completion rates, resident and population density, and the state governor's political party. And also for the second research question, you can see these are just positive and some marginal correlations that deserve a second look. So you can see things here under employment barriers, such as displaced homemakers, migrant seasonal farm workers, people with disabilities, single parents, just as an example here, the fourth quarter earnings, credential rate, median earnings, and age. So I looked at all of these in a hierarchy structure to see how this affected each subvariable. There were many implications for theory and research that emerged from this research. I utilized the practice engagement theory developed by Stephen Redder and the Employability Skills Framework, which grounded this study for future research and practitioners in the field of adult education. In theory, it was found and sustained that the independent variables did correlate with credential attainment and measurable skill gain percentages. This means that regular practice of literacy and numeracy skills leads to credential attainment, and increased adult basic education participation increases the skills to become more college and workforce ready. And the Employability Skills Framework helped to explain the connection between how measurable skill gain percentages are impacted by literacy and numeracy competencies and increasing employability. And for the sake of research, this is what I really got excited about is I would really like to explore more variables that were not contained in the scope of this study. And some more implications that came from this is that it can help us refine best practices to increase ABE participation, how to help them increase their literacy, numeracy skills, credential attainment, employability, and therefore increase those measurable skill gain percentages. I also think a mixed method research design would be really good to amplify the findings from this, to add some qualitative, to learn more about how the ABE practitioners and also the participants, what are their lived experiences and perspectives in experiencing these adult education programs. I think it would really enrich and amplify the findings. Unfortunately, there are limited researchers in the field of adult education. There are not a lot of, that I could find, graduate programs or specializations in this subfield of education. So therefore, there's not a lot of people doing research, and this is something that I think that we can change. Finally, some implications for practitioners. The research that I learned from this is not only from the literature review, but the findings really support the need for increasing awareness. It can affect, how these practitioners recruit, how they retain, the marketing strategies they use. And this is because higher levels of student success are going to help states secure higher levels of funding for their programs. It would help increase college and workforce readiness by increasing their literacy and numeracy skills, and it would also lead to increasing wages, increased access to better healthcare, improve economic and social equity. And one of my favorites is that it would help to increase the diversity in academia, the workforce, and communities by large, just for more equitable outcomes. And one of the things that came out of this is that I think that the literature and the results from this study show that literacy can help to increase self-reliance, dignity, and help these individuals become better advocates for themselves, their families, and their community. And the relationships that were identified between these variables can definitely help inform best practices for state-level adult basic education directors as well. So the key takeaways that I hope that you remember from this is that a quantitative correlational research design did appropriately establish that U.S. jurisdictions and ABE program participant demographics are predictors of measurable skill gain percentages. A gap in the literature was found to explain why some states and ABE programs have higher measurable skill gain percentages. And in adult education, these participants, they face many challenges such as financial, social, economic, and health. And low participation in these programs and low literacy and numeracy gains in a federally funded adult education program is resulting in students not gaining the academic and vocational skills that they need. And under the WIOA legislation, states are informally competing for federal funding. Adult basic education programs and services are performance-based and dependent on the federal funding. And again, the practice engagement theory and employability skills framework grounded this study concerning the conceptual framework to increase literacy, numeracy, and therefore employability skills. Now, this is what the data does not show. These are the faces of real ABE program participants who I had the privilege and opportunity of working close with. They're not just a number. They're not just a face in the crowd. These are real people with real stories who have stories of perseverance and determination to overcome the barriers to their success. They were working hard to develop the academic and workforce skills that they need to create more opportunities for themselves and their families. So this became the why behind my research that I discovered after the fact. This research also changed me as a researcher. It completely changed my worldview. Prior to doing research on this topic, I had no experience in the field of education. I had no idea that it was a thing. And so after starting the literature review, I learned that there were so many things that I had no idea, such as the different funding allocations between the states and what each state has to go through to qualify for those grants from the federal government. I also learned that some of the findings from previous studies were supported by what I found from my research, and it added more insight into the relationship of variables that really we need to look at more closely to find out why, such as the state governor's political party association and how that impacts the adult education funding for those respective states. If you would like to look at my study a little bit more closely to see all of the elements that were explored under those subvariables, you can find a copy of my dissertation in the ProQuest Dissertation and Thesis Database. Thank you for attending my talk on adult basic education, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. That you have some kudos in the chat. Stunning statistics, interesting findings. One of your former instructors is actually here, Dr. Jen Robinson. So just a shout out to her. One question that we have in the chat is if you used or even noticed mediating variables in your independent and dependent hypothesis. Mediating.
Yes, so mediating, I'm thinking that, well, I'll answer with what I found out, which made this kind of hard for me. So hopefully I'm answering the question. So the way the reports are set up, they have a hierarchy, and then they look at how, say, each age group is factored in. And then if you look at it in conjunction to the state, there was a lot of variance. So that's why I did the multi-level regression analysis, because it helped to look at how they were all related, because it was hard to just look at, okay, how does age factor in? Well, there were different levels of age. And so what hierarchy? So you could see the variance. And the multi-level regression analysis also was good in preventing the issue of overestimating or underestimating those results, or the REML method helped to control for if the data was not complete, which was something that I ran into a lot with those reports, because some states, they weren't submitting anything because they don't even have a program. So they can't qualify for that federal funding. So I hope that's how I answered the question with the variance between the variables.
Yeah. Your person indicated thank you for the clarification. What did you, how has this research that you conducted for your dissertation propelled you forward into your new role?
It changed me completely. It changed my worldview of not realizing that literacy was that big of a problem in the United States, because a lot of the research that's being done is not in the United States. I could not find a lot of information on this. And then when my chair mentioned it to me, I had no idea. I was concerned about academic resiliency, but she was like, do you know anything about adult education? So when I started investigating it in my community, and then I went in to be a volunteer, after I collected the data, my mind was blown. I had no idea how pervasive the issue was. And then working with the students, the way I thought I was supposed to show up as an instructor, it changed everything. And it challenged me it was so humbling, and it still is. And I realized that I didn't want to show up and teach the way I thought I was supposed to. And so I realized the bulk of my time was spent helping them with a resiliency intervention plan, because some of these people, they don't even have a car. They can't even get to class. They can't afford the internet to do anything online. And so you have to really break down, some of them, they don't feel like their academics are a priority because they're hungry. A lot of them came to class hungry and they had nowhere to stay. So that shaped me as going, oh, I need to approach education and helping students differently. And it humbled me. And I really focus now. I do it privately now with a lot of them. They just need to know that they have the capability to do this, and that there's somebody there. And there's different ways to accomplish at gaining that credential, and not everybody looks the same.
Thank you. Yeah, somebody said Maslow before Vygotsky. Personal recommendations that you might have for supporting low literacy rates in undergrads in online education.
Absolutely. It was kind of the same thing. You've got to have those Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to make sure that they have those primary needs met, or it's going to be hard to probably help them with their academic goals. And what I found is in undergrad, empathy and listening to their story and customizing a learning model that works for them. It may take a little bit more time. And I don't realize a lot of people have a lot of students, but they really need to be seen, heard, and understood and know that they're not just a number. And a lot of them are afraid of educators. They think they're prepared to be treated with disrespect, which once I gave them a better and more increased positive experience with learning, they became hungry for more. And so I think when you look at the undergrad students, give them a reason to want to be there. Give them a reason to think that the learning experience is a good thing and that their relationship with you as an instructor, if they know that you believe in them, they just might believe you. And I was one of those students a long, long time ago as a kid. It just took one teacher to make me feel like that extrinsic confidence eventually will lead to that intrinsic confidence that they need as a student. So
Super helpful. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks, Dr. Lamb. I love saying that, Dr. Lamb. Thank you to the
thank
audience
you.
for your participation. Please use the survey linked in the chat to nominate TLC presentation for conference awards and share your feedback on this presentation. Another shout out to you, Dr. Lamb. Excellent presentation. So thanks everyone. We'll see you at the next session.
Thank you.